Hello, everybody. We are here on October 16th for the amazing guest presenter, Mollie. I want to say Mollie Parker because that's how I've known her forever, but she has a different name, which I'm going to pull up in just one moment. So she'll be hopping on here, and I think a couple people are trying to join. Hi, Ms. Mollie.
Hi.
How are you?
Good. How are you?
I already forgot your real last name again. I'm like, I was just introducing you. I was saying we're about to hop on with Mollie Parker. Oh, I forgot her last name and I have to look it up.
Szybala.
Szybala, that's right.
It's very hard.
Yes, you guys, I've known Mollie since she was little, and so she is a Mollie Parker forever in my heart.
I took on a very challenging Polish last name with a lot of consonants.
Yes, I love it though. So good. Hi, welcome.
Hi. Thank you.
Thanks for being here. I know a couple of people are trying to hop on. We'll see if they make it, but we're just going to get rocking and rolling so that we make good use of our time. So you guys, Mollie, I am so excited she's here. She is going to talk to us about microbiome and how to heal it using fecal transplant and parasites.
Helminthic therapy.
Yes. And when I posted this, Mollie, I know you can't see it inside of our group, but there's like a million comments of everyone saying, oh my gosh, it's so exciting. I'm so excited. I can't wait.
Oh, cool.
And we do have a couple questions for you specifically, but first I want to introduce you, and then we're going to talk about what the heck is microbiome, and we'll dive deeper into this conversation. Some of it will be repeat of what you and I already had yesterday. A little bit more. So Mollie Szybala earned her doctorate from National University of Natural Medicine in Portland, Oregon. She's post-graduation. Mollie went to receive specialty training in the human microbiome, including individualized nutrition counseling, fecal microbiota transplant, FMT, and helminthic counseling. That means parasite. During her training at Microbiomes LLC, the first company in the United States to develop and successfully deliver FMT capsules. Oh my gosh, that's microbiomes. That's what we were talking about yesterday.
Oh yeah, Microbiomes Labs is separate. That's a supplement company. But this company, I don't know if it was actually developed before or after, but it also, the website is microbiomes.com.
Oh.
And then Microbiome Labs came out afterwards, I believe.
Gotcha.
So,
okay. We've been talking about microbiome. I just had to make that. Hi, Addie. Welcome, Nancy. So happy to see you guys. I'm just introducing the amazing Mollie here. So, and someone's already coming. So where was I? Oh, okay, microbiome to help treat many chronic illness. In practice, Mollie uses her training to offer a novel approach to autoimmune conditions, gastrointestinal conditions, allergies, asthma, Alzheimer's, which is one of the questions we had for you, Miss Addie. I know you'll be excited. Parkinson's, autism, anxiety, multiple sclerosis, depression, and more. Mollie was diagnosed with celiac disease as a teenager before gluten was recognized as it is today. When conventional therapies did not allow her to achieve her health and wellness goals, she began to seek out alternative treatment. Through naturopathic medicine, she learned new tools and received personalized care that was needed to treat the root cause of her disease and ongoing symptoms. Mollie chose to learn naturopathic medicine so she could empower others to take control of their health and find more joy in life. She believes in working with patients to create an individualized and sustainable health plan that treats the whole body, mind, and spirit. She was born and raised in Sun Valley, Idaho. She's a neighbor of mine, where she's returned to her home practice, Sun Valley Natural Medicine, with her husband, the amazing Dr. Corey Szybala, who is a pediatric naturopathic. How cool is that, you guys? And she spends her time enjoying family, friends, her dog Bernie, and all the outdoors has to offer. So welcome.
Thank you.
So excited to be here. So let's start, Mollie. Let's just talk about what the heck is microbiome. I feel like it's a word like inflammation that it's thrown around and people are like, I know I need to heal my microbiome, and I know gut health is so important, but what even does that mean? And what is it comprised of?
Yeah, so essentially our microbiome is now being recognized as an additional organ in the body. So it's a very large component of our body, and it's made up of bacteria, which is what we think of most commonly when we think about the microbiome. But the main component of our microbiome is actually viruses. So essentially trillions of viral particles that mostly live within bacteria, but also within every cell in the body. It also includes parasites, it used to include parasites, but now we've pretty much eradicated most of those. And it includes fungi, which are things like yeast and candida that people are used to talking about, and also other types of species that we really don't know much about, an entire other family called Archaea. So it's just the collection of all of those bugs. And what those bugs represent are an entire ecosystem within our body and all of the different things that they do. So we have at least 10,000 different types of species of bacteria in our body. And we're only like, this is the tip of the iceberg. We just keep trying to learn more and more. And I'm sure that number will continue to expand. And essentially our microbiome is so profound that it makes up 99% of our DNA. So realistically, we only carry 1% of human DNA, and the rest of our body is microbial DNA.
Holy
and
cow.
that, yeah. And so we've always thought of ourselves as being like the, independent humans, and how we think we're in control of what's going on in our lives. And we're learning that it's really the other way around. And from a cell count perspective, it changes a lot. We keep getting kind of different numbers. The DNA number has been more stable, but essentially at least like 60% of your body, when you go look in the mirror, it's bacterial or microbiome. So our microbiome is
us.
it's us. Yeah, it's us. And all the leading researchers out there are saying, without our microbiome and without a healthy and diverse microbiome, life would fail to continue with us. They do absolutely everything in our body. And like I said, we only started learning about it in like the 90s. And so we're just barely learning what it does. But essentially, our gut bugs, from the most obvious perspective, when we eat, they help us break down our food, they help us digest it, and that's sort of what we've thought of our gut bugs and what they do and their purpose. And they do that, and that is important. But even within that process, they help release digestive enzymes, and that affects how we absorb or don't absorb our food. And they also produce hormones. So if we keep eating and we don't feel full, it's because our gut bugs, in one part of the reason is our gut bugs aren't helping produce that hormone that creates satiety for us. So our gut bugs are responsible for a lot of metabolic things as far as blood sugar regulation. Type 1 diabetes is very closely related to microbiome. And even type 2 diabetes, anybody with type 2 diabetes, there's drastic changes in their microbiome. So our metabolism is one very large component of it. Our bacteria also are essential for us because they create essential vitamins like B12 and K2, but also B1, B2. So there's all these different vitamins that our bacteria actually make for us. And there's so many things. But the biggest component, I think, for us that we're really realizing is the immune system.
Yeah.
Our gut bugs, so the bacteria, the viruses, the helminths. Parasites has such a negative connotation. But realistically, just like we have bacteria that are, we're covered in bugs. They're on us, they're within us. The majority are within our gut. But every single part of our body contains bacteria. Even our eye has a microbiome. They're looking at how do you modulate the microbiome of the eye to improve eye health for certain people. The mouth has its own microbiome, and obviously the vaginal microbiome is incredibly important, and so we're learning for the health of babies and a natural vaginal delivery when possible. The health benefits of that are incredibly significant. So we have all kinds of different microbiomes all over our body. They're very, very diverse. We've heard that, the microbiome of the mouth compared to the microbiome of the anus. So it's a tube, right? From the mouth out, is as different from like what you would find at the bottom of the ocean floor to the top of Mount Everest.
Wow.
So we we're essentially just this crazy diverse ecosystem that we don't even know about. Even our right hand has a different microbiome than our left hand. And even things like, if you're one of those people who attracts mosquitoes, we're finding out that one of the reasons is that you carry a microbiome, and that microbiome digests the oils on your skin differently to create breakdown products that the mosquitoes like to come and enjoy.
Oh my gosh.
It attracts them. So
Wow.
I kind of went on a tangent from what the microbiome does, but those are just some fun tidbits.
Well, it's really interesting to have a better, I mean, already my mind is blown. I had no idea how all-encompassing our microbiome was, and to understand a couple of things. Number one, to understand how all-encompassing it is.
Mm-hmm.
We know that there's, the immune gut health correlation is a very widely talked about topic. I know that there's interest in talking about the brain gut health correlation, which is an emerging topic, more and more notice as well. And then also, Mollie, I'm kind of throwing these three things at you that I'd love for you to discuss in whatever order you want. But the other thing is, you mentioned, and I know that I have this issue, and I know I have this issue, like what the gut biome is made, like you said, viruses and bacteria and candida and yeast and parasites and all these things, where there is a really negative connotation out there about parasites, about candida. You don't want to have candida, you don't want to have parasites, you don't want to have spirochetes and bacteria and all these, bad bacteria. But like, what defines good versus bad bacteria? How do we begin to sort through what we should have in our microbiome?
Yeah. And at this point, that's like a very good question to be asking, because I don't think anybody could give you a good answer.
Okay.
The only thing that is foundational through all the literature right now is that the more diversity that you have in all of your species, the healthier you will be. And so the people who have lower diversity are prone to essentially overgrowth of a candida species, overgrowth. And so when things live in harmony, when our ecosystem is balanced, these creatures do what they are supposed to do. When they are put under threat, whether that's from an infection, whether that's from severe trauma or chronic stress or grief, or just eating a high sugar diet every day, which is a stress on the body, they're put into, you start feeding the bugs differently than they should be if you are eating a bad diet. But ultimately, when they're put under stress, our bacteria, they don't just have one mechanism of action. They're like people, for example, as far as, if we're going out with friends and having a great time, we're going to be laughing, we're going to be jovial, we're going to be sending out positive vibes, right? If we are put in a war zone and all of a sudden we're put under threat, we will go into survival mode and do whatever it takes to survive. And that often means for our gut bugs that they're going to start releasing inflammatory chemicals. And so essentially they release, it's like sending out bullets, they're releasing things into the body that damage human cells, that damages other bacteria, and doesn't allow for ultimate health for us. So, and these are defense mechanisms that they've learned over time, because if there is a threat, sometimes shutting down part of the body is a survival skill. But we currently live in a world where most people have chronic stress. And because we live in such a hygienic world and we are no longer living in nature like we used to, we've really decreased the diversity of our microbiome. So we're become much more susceptible to these types of things. So what makes a good bacteria and what makes a bad bacteria ultimately comes down to that bacteria feeling safe in the environment that it's living in, and the quantity of that bacteria. So overgrowth of any of these species it's usually due to undergrowth of another species. So if everybody is living happy on their equal plane, and all of a sudden, you take an antibiotic, women know this all too well. You take an antibiotic, your bacterial count goes down, you get, all of a sudden, the yeast is like, oh, I'm king of the jungle now. And it can, because it doesn't have the bacteria to balance it out, you get overgrowth, right? So that's just kind of the most obvious example. But anytime we do harm to our environment, that's what happens.
That's so amazing, Molly. And making a connection, when I was really sick, I went down to a doctor, Dr. Calzada in Mexico, and he was like, okay, yes, you have parasites, but you also have this Lyme. And one of the most common mistakes that doctors typically make is that they'll diagnose someone like, oh, we're just going to work at getting rid of the overgrowth of parasites, or we're just going to work at getting, and so he described, he's like, you have your virus, the fungus, bacteria, and parasite was how he described it to me, these 4 things, and they're all working in this ecosystem. If you take one away, then it gives more space for the other to expand. So I'm just now making
yeah.
So, okay, amazing. We know then we're having a better understanding of the microbiome and the interrelation between both quote unquote good and bad organisms and how they have a mutual kind of symbiotic relationship to keep the body in balance. Because that helps. Tell us, can you explain a little bit more how that actually helps keep our immune system in balance? And this may lead into the helminthic treatment that you do.
So so this is a confusing thing now. We're still kind of learning all the mechanisms. And so what I'll kind of just dive into the epidemiologic study. So medicine doesn't typically look at essentially medicine over time. But in this case, what we're doing is people are asking the question, why are people in developing worlds developing so many chronic inflammatory illnesses?
In developing worlds.
In the developing world.
Yeah. Okay.
In the developed world.
Okay.
But in third world countries where people are still living in mud huts and have a lot of exposure to nature, these diseases, they don't have them. They don't exist. And so we started looking into that, and what they found is that microbial diversity is much, much higher, and these people all carry symbiotic helminths or parasites. So essentially they have much, much, much more robust immune systems. And what they're finding out is that our immune system its well-being is completely based upon the well-being of our microbiome. So the presence of bacteria and lots of different types of bacteria, that really helps stimulate the growth and the development of the immune system. And what we think the primary job of worms is they train the immune system. And this is so important. So what our microbiome does, like if there's any takeaway, and if I can make this as simple as possible, is our microbiome teaches our immune system, or our white blood cells, what is harmful and what is not harmful, and when to respond to something and when to not respond to something. So if we take out a key species of our microbiome, or it gets depleted in some sort of way, our immune system it loses the ability to recognize what is harmful and what is not harmful. So when this happens, we see a rise in allergies, we see a rise in asthma, we see food intolerances. So gluten is like the perfect example. So many people can't tolerate gluten, and that's because gluten kind of looks like what a bacteria or a virus would produce. It's called antigenic. So it looks like it could be a bacteria or a virus. And when our immune system is well trained, because it's got its microbiome keeping it in check, our immune system just goes, oh yeah, that's gluten, lets it pass through the intestines. When our microbiome is depleted, our immune system is then going, whoa, I don't know if that's bad, it's probably bad, and it'll start attacking it. And therefore we end up with things like either celiac disease or gluten sensitivities. And the same is true with allergens. Our body should be able to say, oh, that's just pollen, that's not harmful. And when our immune system's not there, it goes, oh yeah, I should attack that. So we're getting immune dysregulation. And when we have, oh, go ahead.
I was going to say, I've heard you say this twice, and I feel like there's a lot of information here. So can you just repeat one more time?
Yeah.
The immune dysregulation comes when you said a key pathogen is missing. Like, just explain that piece one more time so that we can hear it on repeat.
Yeah. There's two things that can happen. Either just overall lack of diversity in our microbiome can cause this, but what the like World Health Organization and other people are really concerned about is when we lose a keystone species. So, like an arch, the top of the arch has the triangle wedge, and that's the keystone. And when that keystone is taken out, the arch crumbles.
And what are keystone species?
Well, we're still trying to kind of piece something out and figure it out. But there's one called like Akkermansia municipale or something. But there are just a lot of like the Clostridia species or spore-based species are keystone species. And when they aren't there, because we're talking about an ecosystem, the entire ecosystem wobbles and changes. And so one of the videos that I really love about how an ecosystem can change so drastically is if you YouTube how the wolves, I forget what it's called, how the wolves changed the water in Yellowstone, I think it's called.
I'm typing it, you guys, in the chats. The wolves changed the water in Yellowstone.
And so it's a video about how when the wolves were removed from Yellowstone National Park, how that changed the predation and how by, all of a sudden they're seeing a lot more deer, a lot more elk, and how that ended up affecting the entire ecosystem, including how the flow of the rivers went. So it's things that we just don't think about when we remove something from the ecosystem. And even if it's not completely gone, completely extinct, by reducing amounts of bacteria, we also completely change the environment. And so we have unfortunately been creating this industrialized world to live in, and that's all too common. And it's not the sole component or the sole cause of chronic inflammatory diseases that we're seeing, but it's a very large component of it. And something that when you look at like top threats by the World Health Organization, this microbiome depletion is one of them that they're concerned about. So
that's amazing. So incredible. So, okay, we have this microbiome. We understand the importance of having, we really want everything in moderation in this example, right? I always say we don't necessarily want everything in moderation when it comes to sugar and these inflammatory, but in this example, we want everything in moderation in our microbiome. We want some of the good, quote unquote, a little of the bad, because they keep everything in check. They keep our immune system in check, right?
Yeah.
And so, okay, here we are now. We are a group of individuals who are looking to heal chronic symptoms in our body, from chronic pain, autoimmune conditions, parasitic conditions, Lyme infections, to, hormonal balance, the whole works, right? The whole thing. And in this particular group, we've addressed diet, or currently are addressing diet. We're increasing our water to help push out toxins. We are working on living, stopping to take deep breaths and slow down a little bit, right? Trying to reduce the amount of stress, although in today's society, that is still an ever teetering process. But then there's this other huge component, what are the steps then we might take or consider or even be aware of, Mollie, to begin supporting the microbiome?
So depending on where somebody is, because a lot of people I see, they're like, I can't eat anything, it hurts my stomach. But assuming that somebody is at a place where they can tolerate food, one of the best things that we can do is start eating a lot of different plant species. And so this sounds kind of totally crazy, but the best thing for people to do to increase the diversity of their microbiome is eating 30 different plant species every week. And things like spices count. So it adds up pretty quickly and pretty easily if you're already used to eating a whole foods diet. And it can be pretty fun. And part of that too is just trying to always eat a lot of different colors. And so, you know, eat the rainbow is such a common phrase, and it's so true because those colors from all the different food contain lots and lots of chemicals that are healthy for our gut microbes. So that's kind of so it's a besides fecal transplant, all these therapies they take time. It's not so in order to like really modulate your microbiome, it does takes about 6 months of doing this regularly. And the other thing I like people to be doing is eating a lot of fermented foods and different types of fermented foods, and especially if you can make them from home or get that from the farmer's market, you're going to get a lot more diversity than what you're getting just from the grocery store and kind of getting like the same sauerkraut every week. Which if that's what you like, and if that's kind of the only thing you can tolerate or have time for, then go ahead and do that, because that's fantastic. But you're going to get the most benefit by trying to get it from somebody who made it locally, and trying different fermented veggies or whatever it might be. So those are kind of like the main dietary things. And you're right, like the biggest component to this is what you're coaching right now, which is those everyday stress management techniques, eating a really healthy whole foods anti-inflammatory diet, because what we know sugar does is if we eat a lot of sugar, we feed our sugar-loving bacteria. Our sugar-loving bacteria, then they send signals to the brain like, hey, feed me. I'd like some sugar right now. And so when we think we're like, oh, I'm just craving sugar, I get like, it's just me. It's really coming from the bacteria, and they're telling us, go feed me some sugar.
There's a whole nother set of intelligence inside our body.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. And so when we feed our sugar-loving bacteria, this is a little bit of a tangent, but because we're here, I feel like it's relevant. Those bacteria, they will grow up big and strong, and they start, because they overgrow, right? They get out of balance. They start producing chemicals in the intestine that, like I mentioned before, it damages bacteria, but it also damages the intestinal lining. When it damages the intestinal lining, we end up with the infamous leaky gut. So when we get the leaky gut, the intestine should be like a nice closed system. It just, more or less just opens up, and we get this flow of inflammatory chemicals, undigested foods, everything into the bloodstream. And at that point, we end up with, that's how we can connect things to like Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, but just feeling foggy head. I'm so tired. That fatigue. And in the case of diabetes or something, that also causes fatty liver disease and propagates the cycle of diabetes.
Right.
So that was a side note, but so sugar obviously it's not our friend, even though it's everywhere. And hopefully one day we live in a society where it's not on every shelf, always staring and glaring at us.
I'm holding you to it. You're my partner to make that. Go ahead.
Oh, no, go ahead.
I was just going to say, just looking at time, we have about 15 or so more minutes, and then I want to open up to questions. And I would love for you to talk about, fecal transplant and helminthic
therapy.
And how these particularly, because I know this is what you would like really specialize in, is a very unique treatment that I don't know anyone else who does this. So like what encompasses these? How does it help us heal? How do we know when we might be a right candidate for it? Let's just talk about that a little bit.
Yeah. So this will be a pretty quick overview in 15 minutes, but essentially I'm going to go ahead and lay this out there as well. As I do counseling for this, I'm in the state of Idaho, where I'm not recognized as a licensed physician, even though I carry a license as a primary care doctor in Washington. So anything I do is just counseling people, because I believe people should have the right to make a choice for their health, even if that choice is not available in mainstream healthcare. So, so for helminthic therapy, the people that I talk to mostly about doing this are people with severe allergies, asthma, or autoimmune disease. And that is because there are a few studies out there, and there are a lot of people that are self-treating. And so there's a lot of people writing their stories online, and one guy named John Scott, who is doing an incredible job, and William Parker from Duke, who they're recording essentially all these people who are self-treating and figuring out the dosages and who responds best and who isn't a great candidate for these therapies. But there are different types of worms, and these are symbiotic worms. So these are worms that humans have carried since the very, very beginning of time. And even the earliest hominoids ever found carried worms. So the immune system has developed in tandem with worms. And about 150 years ago, or 100 years ago, we pulled the worms out of our system because at that point in time, our thinking was bacteria, parasites cause death, because that was the leading cause of death at that time. People were dying of infectious disease. So we kind of demonized all infections and pulled them completely out of the body. And so now what we're seeing is this immune dysregulation. And so for these people, we give them very moderate and controlled doses of these parasites, and there's different types that can be taken, and that's one of the things I counsel on is the different types and what might be effective for people. But essentially what they do is they go into the body, they actually decrease inflammation. And that's because these are symbiotic, they want to live in us. They want to create a home here. And so when they enter the body, they actually release anti-inflammatory chemicals, both in the GI tract and into the bloodstream.
And they release those chemicals because the body is currently so inflamed and toxic, it's not a good home for them to live in.
Yes, yes. So they're like, I don't want to live in this nasty home. I'm going to spruce it up a little bit. So they create a nice, healthy home for themselves by decreasing inflammation. They also communicate with our bacteria, and they've been shown to alter the diversity of the bacteria and create a healthier balance of the bacterial microbiome. And then the big thing that they do is it does take about 6 months minimum. Sometimes it can take up to a year, but then they start talking to the immune system. The immune system, which hasn't been kept in check because we've taken these bugs out, is all of a sudden it looks around and it goes, oh yeah, I'm supposed to be protecting the body from those worms. I don't need to be protecting the body from this pollen. Or it'll say, oh yeah, I can see that this worm is, what I'm supposed to be guarding, and that this, if you're having an autoimmune response, it'll say, that's self-tissue. I don't need to keep attacking this body. So it essentially gives the immune system its job back. And when the immune system has its job back, it doesn't have to be wandering around all day looking for something to fight. Yeah. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay.
Addie and Nancy, does that make sense to you guys? Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, cool.
So we've had pretty amazing stories. Like there's this woman that, so I don't provide the worms. I help people find good sources to get them from. But we had this woman in Portland, and she was a nurse, and she had an anaphylactic response. She couldn't figure out what to, but every year of her life, and she had been hospitalized at least once per year for severe anaphylaxis. And so, she was like, I don't know what else to do. She took the worms and, didn't hear back from her. About a year later, we finally got a hold of her, and she was like, oh, this is the first year of my life I haven't had an anaphylactic response.
Wow.
And then in the case of things like EBV.
Epstein-Barr virus.
Yes, Epstein-Barr virus. I have not worked with a Lyme patient who has chosen to do helminthic therapy. Mm-hmm. But in people who have these sort of just generalized immunodeficiencies, and in the case of EBV, when we have EBV, everybody's exposed to EBV. And the body's immune system should be able to recognize it, get it sick for a little bit, manage it, and then tuck it away. And it doesn't leave the body. It always lives within the body, but it's dormant. It's in hibernation. And when we have a poor immune system. Oh, sorry, this is another little bit of an analogy, but what I like to think about, I was thinking to help clarify from our conversation yesterday, is I stole this from Dale Bredesen, who is the Alzheimer's guy. Our microbiome is like the surveillance cameras in a parking lot. And so when we deplete or take away parts of our microbiome, we knock out all those cameras. So if you have something like EBV, and it doesn't have any surveillance, you know, it'll just overgrow. And then you might go do high dose vitamin C, you might go do all these therapies to decrease the viral load. And sure enough, you get the viral load decreased, but if you haven't put up any of the surveillance cameras, it just comes right back up. So by adding something like the hookworm, and I've seen great results with people with EBV, it's like, boom, kicking on the immune system. We've got the surveillance cameras back on, and it's like, oh, I can see you. You're not that tough of a virus. Let's go ahead and put you away.
Wow. Fascinating.
Yeah. So there are certain sort of immune deficiency viruses like that we just shouldn't have chronically, that respond really well to helminthic care. And fecal transplant is pretty similar. I do find better results in it with people who have ulcerative colitis or Crohn's disease, multiple sclerosis. Oh, you just get the most amazing results with both of those. In the case of multiple sclerosis, there are studies that show essentially having a worm, it stops the progression of multiple sclerosis.
Wow.
Which is just insane. There's no medication that can do that. And doing fecal transplants in the case of multiple sclerosis can actually reverse disease. So I'm getting, where should I go next, Jenny?
So yeah, I know. Okay, so before we go on to a fecal transplant, so you're saying ulcerative colitis, MS, and Crohn's disease in particular have amazing success with fecal transplant. Yeah,
and for a neurologic perspective, we're really getting into, there was the most amazing autism study that just happened. And we're probably going to be getting a couple Parkinson's and Alzheimer's studies that hopefully are done well, and we'll see some good results from that. But
cool. Okay.
And of course, for people with Lyme, what I've done with counseled people with Lyme disease to do is, you know, lots of antibiotics equals what? Lots of candida. So the fecal transplant has really improved quality of life by at least mitigating the overgrowth of candida.
Okay, amazing. So before we go on to the fecal transplant, I just want to ask, are there any counter, what is the word? Like, is there anything in terms of helminthic therapy that people would not qualify well for helminthic therapy? Like, is there anything we should be aware of when considering if this is a good treatment?
Well, so ironically, the primary thing is also what most people treat for, which is anybody with really terrible allergies. They're more likely to have a negative response. To
helminthic therapy?
To helminthic therapy, yeah.
Even though that's what it heals?
Yeah. So because what it does is it will provoke an allergic response.
I see.
Initially.
Okay.
And
so
then,
if it's a severe allergic response.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it follows the same pathway, the immune system pathway, as allergies. So our immune system either has the opportunity to create allergies or to fend off parasites. And in the absence of parasites, that entire arm of the immune system just swings towards allergies.
Gotcha.
So it can provoke those. I mean, that's what I like to talk to people about, is to see if they are in a good space to receive it. But typically it just kind of comes down to the allergy component.
Yeah.
People who are extremely immunocompromised, there's a lot more risk inherently with that as well.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Amazing. So let's go on to fecal transplant, right? And you guys, you're going to have questions, be able to ask some questions here in a moment. And anyone listening to the recording at the end, will make sure to get you the best method to contact Mollie if you have questions, or she does coaching and consulting, so she can work with you virtually. And I'll let Mollie explain that more. But from a fecal transplant standpoint, tell us a little bit. I know it's poop, right?
Poop, yeah.
What's poop? So like, what are we doing here? What's going on, and how is this helping us?
Yeah. So fecal transplants are when you take the microbiome of somebody who is very healthy, aka you take their poop. In the lab, like where I used to work, we would isolate the healthy bacteria out and then put it into capsules, and people would take that and essentially within 24 hours, in the case of infections that are resistant to antibiotics, they're better. So essentially the stool from somebody who's healthy, the guidelines for looking at that are people who have never taken antibiotics, people who had a natural vaginal delivery, were breastfed for a year, eat, an organic, healthy diet, and don't have any, a history of autoimmune disorder, mood disorder. The list is quite long, but that's kind of the very, very gist of it. And these are people who are more likely to have a more diverse microbiome. And of course, it gets very, very tested. And when that microbiome is introduced to somebody, profound health effects occur. So,
wow. So they take the bacteria out of the fecal matter,
mm-hmm. Yeah,
and put it into a supplement form?
Yeah, into like a capsule.
And then you drink it, or you insert it? Sorry.
So no, those are good questions. So there's lots of ways that it can be done. When I coach people to do an at-home FMT, they're typically screening their own donor and making enemas for themselves. And when they make an enema, it does contain the bulk matter. But when we make it in the lab, what we do is we'll take the whole stool and we just isolate out the bacteria, and then we put it in capsules, and you can take them orally. And that's just a lot safer for people who we can treat legally with C. diff infection, which is essentially a antibiotic resistant infection of the colon that has a very high mortality rate. So when people have this, they're usually too sick to receive it the other way.
Is there why would you do one over the other? I mean, for me, I'm like, I feel like the supplement, but why a at-home process?
So at home, because it's not legal for me to provide pre-made fecal transplants for people for anything other than C. diff, which is this antibiotic resistant. So the FDA created this loophole because they had to, because people were dying at such a high rate, and this infection's actually growing and growing and growing. And so the FDA cannot regulate a fecal transplant because every single fecal transplant will be different in its composition. So they can't make it a drug.
Because it's not consistent.
So it's in this weird limbo land. You used to be able to treat everybody, but the FDA kind of cracked down on that. Although there has only been one very severe, one major adverse event that's ever happened. So, or maybe two. So it's ultimately a very, very safe therapy, one compared to other pharmaceuticals, especially. But the adverse events occurred in situations where it appears that their donor screening was not adequate.
Right. So how does someone get a hold of a supplement? Like, do you have to have C. diff and prove you have C. diff and find, like, how does that work?
Yeah. So, when I'm licensed here in Idaho, essentially what I'll be able to do is just do a virtual consultation, receive records that shows that somebody has C. diff, and I can get that to them within 24 hours usually.
Oh, okay. So it's still possible. It's just, okay, I'm understanding.
For C. diff, it's possible. For other things, it's not. And so that's where the coaching comes in. And that's when I help people find a good donor. I help them decide if this is a good fit for them, if it's worth it for them, and how to do it effectively. Because if you look online, what you'll see is like, oh, I just, I did one fecal transplant. I thought I'd get better. But what we're getting more into is, and certainly my experience is something, the name is changing of fecal transplant to fecal transfer therapy, where essentially people are taking maybe one high dose fecal transplant, but then doing like daily low dose, like they would take a probiotic. So it's kind of like just taking a super probiotic every single day for like 3 months or 2 months. And people who did that are having really great outcomes.
Wow.
Which is harder. So I can't wait till regulations change.
Yeah. Yeah. It's always so tricky, right, with the FDA and what has to happen. But this is such good information to know, because it's like, these are buzzwords again that maybe not the helminthic therapy. I think that's very advanced, but the fecal transplant at least has been around. Like, you kind of know about it, but what are the ins and outs, and how does it actually help us? All of that. It's so good to have a better understanding. So thank you.
Yeah.
Is there anyone, again, for the fecal transplant that you would not recommend doing? Is it the same as the helminthic, or like how?
At this point, it seems like there, again, there's really only higher risk with the severely immunocompromised.
Yeah.
So the two people who have had adverse outcomes, they were both hospitalized, and the hospital hasn't actually released all the full information that we really do need to know why things went so wrong with them. But ultimately, it just comes down to, if you're going to be at higher risk if you're taking some kind of medication that decreases the functioning of your immune system, you have diabetes, that kind of thing.
Yeah, autoimmune type kind.
Yeah.
So okay, you told us for the helminthic therapy and also the fecal matter transplant, the people that really benefit the most from, right? And if we don't fall into those categories, like for example, ulcerative colitis, MS, Crohn's disease, maybe Lyme, maybe autism for fecal matter transplant, people, let's see here, what was it? Oh, I don't think I wrote down for the helminthic, but you're telling us about the people who, or the conditions of people who most benefit. What about if we don't fall into those categories, and we now have want to count my 30 plant-based products every week and make sure I'm getting them. Like, what about us, right? Like where do we go?
Yeah. And so I think my thinking is that, if I had the resources for it, if I were somebody in the position who had the resources to do this, it's like I said, you've taken out the surveillance in the body. And then if you go, we'll frequently see people and they go through rounds of IV therapy, or are constantly taking antimicrobials or antibiotics. And it's just part, I think, so after doing something like that, the way to maintain the health benefits of that, I think, is to restore the surveillance. And so I think there really is a place for that. It's just, we don't have the research for it. And so it's one of those things where I talk to people and try to figure out, where are you? What has your health history looked like? What have you been exposed to? Is this something, do we need to do a therapy like that, and see if that helps improve, at least let you be in remission or not have a flare for X amount of time. Or even if it just increases your quality of life by 25%, is that 25% going to be worth it for you to try this?
Yeah.
So, I think any doctor who says, I have all the answers, I know this, I know that, we're not there, right? This entire subset of disease is novel to us. And I think for me, for people like you or people that you coach, this is just a therapy that I think should be available. And no, we can't guarantee results, but there are so many people who try it and they're like, oh my gosh, I'm so much better. And there's other people who have so much hope going into it and they don't see the results that they were hoping for. And so that just is further proof that there is something else underlying. But I think it's just, it provides a lot of hope. And I think for a lot of people, it really does improve quality of life, at least for a certain period of time.
It's one of the many layers, right? There's so many layers to healing.
Yes.
You have to look at diet. You have to look at lifestyle. You have to look at the microbiome. You have to look at stress. Like all of these pieces. Fall into place, and they work through a symbiotic relationship or not.
Yeah.
Okay, that is amazing. And so it, like you said, it really becomes more individualized, and that is the role that you play, is helping people determine what if it's a good role for them or not.
Whereas I think for some of these other people where we have research and a lot more people have done it, it's kind of a no-brainer. It's just like, yep, this will help you, 50% chance it'll help you.
Okay.
So Whereas everybody else, it's a toss up, unfortunately, still.
And very last question, and then we're going to open this up, and maybe we can, if you can stay 5 more extra minutes, if it works for you.
Yeah, no problem.
What are there, do you see people having negative, like you said, there's only been 2 people reported of like really reverse or significantly negative kind of impact from doing these protocols. That's out of the thousands and thousands of people that have done this.
Hundreds of thousands.
Hundreds of thousands.
Yeah.
So it's not a fear of if it's going to hurt you, because to be entirely honest, that's where my brain goes, just because of what I've been through. Like I have been, there is a total belief of like these organisms scare me, because
right. Yeah.
it's not that they would possibly make a person sicker. It's just whether or not it heals you, or is that missing piece that you really need to.
Correct. Yeah. Most typically, yeah.
I needed that for myself. Awesome. Okay, Nancy and Addie, I am so excited you guys are still here, and I want to open up the floor to both of you to ask any questions that you may have. It's amazing to see your faces, so thank you. Go ahead and unmute yourself and ask away.
I just had a quick question because of my mother is 68 and was diagnosed with Alzheimer's a couple years ago, but they said she's had it for at least 5 years. So we're looking at, 62, 60, around there.
Right.
I don't know if Alzheimer's is classified as an autoimmune disease. Like, would she even be applicable for this? And if she is, like, we want to hop in on a study.
Yeah.
Because once I get her moved out here, I can be watching her diet and eating, and making sure that everything's anti-inflammatory. And then when we, do something like this.
Yeah. And so the thinking about Alzheimer's now is that Alzheimer's is essentially a symptom of something else going on in the body. Because like I mentioned before, when we have leaky gut, we get inflammatory particles in the bloodstream, and that goes up to the brain. And that actually causes leakage in the blood-brain barrier, and it alters the immune system within the brain. And the brain also says, okay, there's something else going on in my body. And instead of remembering where I put my purse, or remembering that conversation I just had, or what I ate for breakfast, I am in survival mode now, and I have to focus on whatever the root cause of this Alzheimer's is in my body, whether that's blood sugar regulation for most people, or if it's of infectious origin and somebody's been battling Lyme for however long. So the key, step one, I would say is, Dale Bredesen, he wrote a great book. You can also listen to it like on Audible.
How do you spell his last name?
Bredesen.
Okay, Bredesen. Okay.
And that should give you, I think that's a good place for you to just really learn more and be able to relate more to what might be happening with your mom while you care for her. But additionally, once you sort of get the gut healed up, and depending on the stage that she's in, a lot of it can be managed, potentially reversed, potentially just stay exactly where it is. And, there's different types of Alzheimer's genetically.
Oh, absolutely.
So, this is just general, but so there's a lot of potential for you to help maintain where she is and or reverse. And, I think that's, we could have a conversation where seeing where your mom is and knowing her current health status, and certainly you'd want to wait until she's eating a good diet with you, and then see if you doing a fecal transplant at home for her would be an option, because it's unlikely that it would cause harm, and the potential benefits of it, while still unknown, could be pretty great.
Right, absolutely. No, if that's not something I am able to do at my home, because I'm just excited for you to just go on and get certified, and I mean, like in Idaho.
Yeah.
And because then, we just need someone like you to help us get the pill form from a lab.
Right. And so unfortunately, I can only get the pill form for people who have Clostridium difficile, and hopefully soon for people with autism. So I don't see that changing incredibly quickly
Okay.
unless these studies with Alzheimer's and Parkinson's come out and are as significant as they were with autism, in which case they're fast tracking fecal transplants for autism right now.
How common is C. diff? I feel like that's not insanely uncommon.
It's very common.
Yeah.
I don't know the rate right now, actually, honestly.
Like your mom could, like, I guess the point of me saying that is that it could very well be that people are unaware that they have C. diff, but if they're tested for it, they may have it, in which case Mollie could potentially get the supplement.
Yeah.
Like it's, you know, just because we don't have a diagnosis of it right now doesn't mean it doesn't potentially exist in the body.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I just have to take her somewhere to figure that out.
That's true.
I'm going to need a one-on-one with you. I have a lot more, but I don't want to hog all the time. I'm very excited about this and interested in all of the, you know, alternative medicines and things that I can do for myself. You know, my husband, even my animals, and most importantly, mom. So I guess she could be a candidate. So I just also have to figure out, because you said at that you could do it at home, but then I have to
it's
find
not
some
the
poo
most
poo and
yeah.
Not opposed to it. I know I can't be a donor. So you find a baby.
Typically we use children of other naturopaths or other really healthy people.
So we'll and right before we get off the call, we'll make sure to get all of Mollie's contact information, Addie, and you can reach out and have like that one-on-one if that's something that
I think that'd be great. Thank you.
Well, it's nice to meet you now.
Yeah.
Miss Nancy, hello.
Hi, Jenny. How are you?
It's good. So good to see you.
Good to see you. I have two questions. More in the arena of the microbiome than particularly, because I've been fascinated with microbiome. And I'm actually, at the moment, I'm much more successful with reintroducing raw and fermented foods to my dog, because here in Pennsylvania, it's apparently legal with a lot of scrutiny to sell a raw fermented grass-fed meat for a dog, and raw fermented kefir and raw fermented fish stock and raw goat's milk for a dog.
Yeah.
But I am curious because I've been listening to a ton of podcasts, Doctor's Pharmacy, Dr. Hyman's. So I've gotten really I'm probably drowning in information at this point. But one of the things that had been said is that most people, when they take probiotics, it's just like it goes right through them, because that's not something that your body actually can use. And that, you know, like fermented foods, like what I'm giving my dog, are really much better than any of the probiotics. And I'd love for you to comment on that.
Yeah, so I agree with that. So how most probiotics work is they don't actually colonize our gut. They pass through and they kind of say hello, how are you doing? I'm a good role model and you should do good things. And then they leave the body. So they do influence our other gut bugs to do things that are more likely to be beneficial to the body than harmful to the body. But they don't colonize typically. But you know, one of the things they can do is say, all right, like, you're my friend. You know, they might send out growth signals to other bacteria telling them to grow and proliferate. In some cases that's good. Sometimes it can actually be negative. But no, it's really just the act of them passing through. So that's why I really do prefer ferments and to have most people on a lot of fermented foods. And getting lots of different sources, because different vegetables are going to be producing different bacteria in that culture. So trying to you know, mix it up between if you can tolerate kefir. Kefir is a fantastic source, but that's also going to be different from, you know, what you're getting in a veggie.
It's really challenging, I've discovered, to find unpasteurized kefir.
Okay.
I actually yesterday found one place where I could find unpasteurized goat and cow kefir.
Oh, wow.
But it's really challenging to the point of which I have been slightly tempted to just use a little of my dog's, even though it says not for human consumption on it. I also know that it comes from nice Jersey cows that are selected by the particular person who's producing this food. So it's a very small operation. So I would almost trust that. But
I would go ahead and call them and just ensure that it is human grade food before ingesting any of it.
Right.
And a lot of times for dogs, dog probiotics are formulated differently than human probiotics with very different strains. So if you were to dive in, that could cause distress. So I would, before experimenting, I would definitely call that company and just try to get a good idea of what they're using, and how it differs from what a human would.
Even if it's kefir, you think they would use different strains to produce the kefir?
Yeah. So if for their starter strain, that could be very different from what they would use for a human.
Okay, good to know. I won't continue on that experiment.
Scientist.
Okay.
I like it though. I like how the dogs have better.
Yeah, I know. My dog is doing really well. He looks super healthy, actually. So it's actually really good evidence for fermented foods. So so is kefir, and this is sort of for you and for Jenny, because Jenny, you've kind of discouraged us from doing too much dairy. Would kefir be kind of an exception to that, or?
Are you asking me? If you're asking me,
yeah,
I'm curious to see what Molly has to say. I know that you can go kefir, you can do coconut kefir. Like there's a lot of non-cow dairy forms of kefir. With that said, I'll let Molly answer this in terms of the microbiome and inflammation.
Yeah. You know, I think if people tolerate dairy, which most people don't, it is an inflammatory food in at least 50% of people. So I think when you're going through some kind of program to kind of remove as many things that could be causing negative effects or insulting the body, you want to remove dairy for at least 30 days. And then if you do reintroduce it and you notice, okay, I obviously responded negatively to that, you take it out forever. Right. But if you reintroduce it and you say, okay, no, that was actually fine, the best form of dairy for you to have would be in the form of kefir or like 24-hour yogurt. So, you know, a lot of my clients here, they'll make their own yogurt. And people who don't tolerate dairy, I certainly have them just doing coconut kefir or coconut yogurt.
I'm curious because I've seen coconut yogurt and kefir, but that seems like a pretty processed food. So I'm trying to also stay away from processed food. So
I have people just make it with the Instant Pot craze. Most people have Instant Pots and they have a yogurt feature on it on some of them. And so I just have a lot of people making their own yogurt now. So they'll be buying.
Do that.
Yeah. So they'll either just buy, you know, canned coconut milk without additives or coconut powder. So people are just getting creative and doing it that way.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Super fun.
Look online and find an interesting recipe for that.
Yeah.
Thank you. One other microbiome question. Microbiome and hearing. That you mentioned sight, but you didn't mention hearing. And I had a virus in July that has got me down to 30% hearing in my left ear.
I definitely don't know enough about microbiome in the ear to speak towards that. but I think what you're doing, realistically, what you're doing with Jenny, as far as just managing inflammation in the body is.
I froze you.
Uh-oh. Yeah, everything's frozen. But can people hear me right now?
I can hear you, Molly.
Okay.
Yeah, you keep going.
But so managing the microbiome and limiting inflammation will reduce any chronic ongoing damage. So overall body health will directly influence that.
And what about the regeneration of cells? Like I know, right, our cells reproduce every on where the cell is in the body-ish 120 days. So what I understand how when we eliminate the inflammation and the toxins within the cells, then we can absorb more vitamins and nutrients and the cells can reproduce. How does that look in terms of microbiome? Like how does that play into the reproduction of cells? Because we could essentially regenerate the hearing potentially, right? I mean, is that,
I mean,
it's to support the hearing, I guess, maybe.
Without knowing the underlying cause of what's going on, whether it's related to ossification of bones or if it's related to like the cilia within the ear, I really don't have enough information to speak on that.
Yeah. Okay, awesome.
Okay, fair enough. Thank you.
Nancy, when your phone, when you froze, I don't know if you heard Molly, but she did have a little bit more to say, so you can listen to it.
Yeah, I'm going to have to listen to it. I didn't know who froze, but I definitely froze.
Okay, good. Thank you, Nancy.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Jenny and Molly.
Good to see you. Molly, do you have time for one more question if Christy has any question?
Yeah.
Christy, if you want to unmute yourself, or you're unmuted now, if you have any questions.
I'm sorry, I missed most of it, so I really don't have any questions. I'll have to go back and watch the whole thing, but I just, the little bit that I caught was really interesting. So thank you.
If you came in at the end, you really got the big guns.
Just the last little bit, but I'm sorry I couldn't come here earlier.
Well, thanks for making it, Christy. It's good to hear your voice. Molly, thank you.
Yeah.
So much. I mean, wow, a world of information, a world of information.
Yeah.
And it is really a whole nother world of this microbiome that's taking place in our body. So I think a lot for everyone to think about. I know I'm going to be listening to the recording of this call again.
Yeah. And, you know, we really didn't get to even touch much on like the gut-brain connection. So I would say of all of this, we touched on like basically nothing. So there's so much more that could be said and talked about. So
maybe we'll have to have you on for a round two.
Round two.
Round two of the and specifically talk about the gut brain. That might be really awesome. Yeah. I'll chat with you on that, Mom.
So
thank you. So how can people get in touch with you? I know people are like curious and Addie wants to do a one-on-one. I know I want to do a one-on-one. I'm sure other people listening to the recording will want to. What is the best place where people can join your community, be in touch with you, set up an appointment? How do we do that?
So our business is Sun Valley Natural Medicine in Sun Valley, Idaho. You can look at, find us online at svnaturalmedicine.com. Our phone number is 208-928-4022.
Wait, hold on really quick. I'm typing on 208-928-4022. All this is in the chat section if anyone's listening and needs to have a visual.
People can just sort of contact us that way. We have, if you get to the website, you can contact us through the website via email as well.
Okay.
So
perfect. Thank you so much. And I really appreciate it. Well, I'm for sure, like, I'm like, okay, I have a salad at home that has leeks and kale, red bell peppers, onions, some garlic, avocado. I'm like, how many things? I'm going to like write it down, I think, as a little science experiment this week and see if I'm
it's actually really fun. So
that's awesome. Thank you so much. Love to you all. Have a beautiful day. And Molly, we really appreciate your time.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah. Take care. Bye-bye, you guys.
Bye.